I want to tell you something that happened to me when I was 12 years old. Something I have carried inside my chest like a stone for a very long time. Not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to me though at the time, it certainly felt that way. But because of what it taught me. And because of what I did after. It was Christmas Eve. The snow had been falling since noon. Big, quiet flakes that covered everything in a white so clean it almost looked unreal. The kind of snow that makes the world go still. The kind that should have been beautiful. I remember standing on the front porch of the house that used to be my home, holding my little brother Daniel's hand. He was 7. He was wearing his blue coat, the one with the missing button that we kept meaning to fix, but never did. His nose was already turning red from the cold. My stepmother, Patricia, had just told us to get out. She had opened the front door, handed me a plastic bag with a few of our things inside, and said, very calmly, as if she were asking us to take the trash out, "Your father is not here. And I don't want you in this house tonight." I remember looking at her face. She was wearing a red blouse. She had her hair done. She was getting ready for a Christmas party. There were guests coming. And we, it seemed, did not fit into her plans. She closed the door. I heard the lock click. Daniel looked up at me. He didn't cry. He was too young to fully understand, I think. But I understood. I was 12. And I had understood things too early for a long time by then. I squeezed his hand. "It's okay," I told him. "Come on." And we walked out into the snow. I want to tell you what happened that night. But to do that, I have to go back. Because this story did not start on Christmas Eve. It started years before, on a Tuesday morning in September, when a woman named Patricia walked through our front door and smiled at me for the very first time, and I felt, deep in my stomach, that something was about to change forever. I was right. My name is Clara. My father's name was Robert, but everyone called him Bobby. He was a tall man with wide shoulders and a laugh that you could hear from 3 rooms away. He worked at a lumberyard. He smelled like sawdust and coffee. He was not a perfect man, nobody is, but he loved us in the way that matters most. He showed up. He tried. My mother passed away when I was 8 and Daniel was 3. I won't say too much about that, because even now it takes something for me to think about it. She was sick for 2 years before she went. And when she left a hole in our house that nobody quite knew how to fill. For a while, it was just the 3 of us, me, Daniel, and Dad. We found a rhythm. Dad cooked pancakes on Sundays. I helped Daniel with his homework. We watched old movies on Friday nights and ate popcorn out of the big yellow bowl that Mom had bought at a garage sale years ago. It was quiet sometimes. And sad. But it was ours. Then came Patricia. Dad met her at a work event. A company dinner. She was a friend of someone's wife, one of those introductions that people make without really thinking about it, just filling a seat at a table. But Dad came home that night looking lighter than he had in a long time. And a few weeks later, he brought her to the house for dinner. She was pretty. Dark hair. Bright eyes. She wore a blue dress and brought flowers, yellow ones, which she handed to me with a smile and said, "These are for the lady of the house." I was 9 years old. I didn't know what to do with that. I blushed and said thank you. Daniel showed her his toy trucks. She sat on the floor with him and made engine noises, and he laughed so hard he fell over. That night, after she left, Dad sat at the edge of my bed and asked me what I thought of her. "She seems nice," I said. He nodded slowly. "She is nice." He paused. Is it okay? Is it okay with you that I'm spending time with her?" I told him yes. Because I meant it. Because Dad deserved to be happy. And because, at 9 years old, I still believed that people were mostly what they showed you at first. They dated for a year. Then they got married in a small ceremony at the town hall, just family and a few close friends. Patricia wore cream. I was the flower girl. Daniel kept dropping the ring and laughing about it. It was a good day. For a little while, everything was okay. Patricia moved into our house. She brought her own things, her furniture, her curtains, her dishes. Slowly the house began to look different. Mom's yellow bowl got moved to the back of a cabinet. The family photos on the hallway wall got rearranged. Small things. Things I noticed, but did not say out loud. Patricia worked as a bookkeeper for a dental office. She was organized. She liked things in order. She made lists and kept schedules and knew exactly where everything was supposed to be. In some ways that was good. Our house ran more smoothly than it ever had. Dinner was at 6 every night. Laundry was done on Saturdays. Bills got paid on time. But she was not warm in the way that Dad was warm. She was not the kind of person who sat on the floor and made engine noises. As the months passed, I started to notice that the kindness she had shown us in the beginning was getting quieter. Not gone. Just smaller. She had a daughter from her first marriage. Her name was Melissa. She was 14 when they got married, 2 years older than me. Melissa lived with her father most of the time, but she came to stay with us on school holidays and some weekends. She was pretty and confident, and she always smelled like expensive perfume. Patricia treated Melissa differently than she treated us. And that was natural. Melissa was her daughter. I understood that. But over time the difference stopped feeling natural and started feeling like something else. Like a line drawn through the middle of the house. On one side was Melissa. On the other side were Daniel and me. Dad didn't see it. Or maybe he saw it and didn't know what to do about it. He was working more hours at the lumberyard by then. A promotion that came with more responsibility and longer days. He left early and came home tired. He trusted that his house was peaceful. He believed Patricia when she told him things were fine. Because she always said things were fine. But they were not fine. It started with small things. It always does. The first time I noticed something was off, I was 10 years old. It was a Saturday morning, and I had made Daniel breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, because Dad had gone to help a neighbor fix a fence and Patricia was still sleeping. When she came downstairs and saw the dishes in the drying rack, she didn't say good morning. She looked at the pan on the stove and said, "Clara, you left grease on the burner." "I've told you before about the burner." She hadn't told me before. Not about that. But I said sorry and I cleaned the burner. That evening, when Dad got home, she told him that I had been careless in the kitchen and nearly caused a problem. Dad looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Be careful, sweetheart." I said okay. I went to my room. I sat on my bed and felt the beginning of something I couldn't name yet. Not quite anger. Not quite sadness. Something in between. That was how it went for the next year or two. Small corrections that felt larger than they should. Rules that seemed to apply to Daniel and me but not to Melissa. Chores assigned to me on days when Melissa sat watching television. Comments made in quiet voices that I was meant to hear but could never quite repeat to anyone because they were small enough to be explained away. "That dress doesn't really suit you, Clara." "Daniel, don't talk so much at the table. It's not polite." Melissa worked so hard in school this semester. She's just naturally bright. Nothing that would shock you if I said it once. But said over and over in different ways, across many months, it starts to feel like water wearing down a stone. Slowly. Quietly. Until one day you look down and you realize you've been made smaller. Dad was present but distant. That's the only way I can say it. He was there in the house. He hugged us, asked about school, came to my recitals and Daniel's soccer games. But there was a layer of exhaustion around him that made it hard to reach him. And Patricia, she was very good at being perfect when he was in the room. Warm smiles. A hand on his shoulder. The kids had a good day. So he believed her. The turning point in the slow burn of those years came when I was 11. It was spring, close to the end of the school year. My teacher, Mrs. Aldridge, had nominated me for a regional writing competition. I had written a short story, a quiet little story about a girl and her grandmother and a garden, and Mrs. Aldridge said it was one of the best things she'd read from a student in years. I was given an award certificate and a small medal at a ceremony at school. I came home so proud I thought I might float right off the ground. Patricia was in the kitchen when I came through the door. I held up the certificate. "I won," I said. "The writing competition. First place." She looked at the paper. She looked at me. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "That's very nice, Clara. But don't let it go to your head. Humble children are more likable than proud ones." I put the certificate down on the kitchen table. I went upstairs. I didn't float anymore. That evening, Dad came home and saw the certificate, and he swept me up in a hug and said he was the proudest father in the world. And I held on to that, onto his happiness, like a life raft. But the truth was, Patricia's words had already done their work. Because that is what careful, quiet cruelty does. It doesn't need much time to plant its seeds. After that, things moved faster. Or maybe I just started seeing them more clearly. I was getting older. My eyes were opening in ways they couldn't when I was younger. I started to notice the patterns. The way she spoke to us differently when Dad wasn't there. The way she would sigh when I walked into a room, as if my presence was a burden. The way she gave Melissa the better bedroom when she visited, and quietly moved my things to make space without asking me. I want to be fair. I want to tell this honestly. Patricia was not a monster. She was a woman who had made a life before us, and who had taken on a stepfamily that she perhaps was not fully prepared for. Maybe she had her own wounds. Maybe she had her own sadness. I believe that now. I am older. I understand more. But I was 11. And 11-year-olds do not think about the wounds of adults. They just feel what they feel. And what I felt was this: we were in the way. Daniel, bless his heart, didn't feel it as sharply as I did. He was younger and sweeter, and he simply loved everyone around him without conditions. He would climb into Patricia's lap sometimes, and she would let him, and hold him with something that looked almost like warmth. But even Daniel had started to ask me, in the quiet of our room at night, "Clara, why does Patricia look sad when we come home?" I didn't have an answer for him. So I just said, "She has a lot on her mind." He nodded like that made sense. Turned over. Fell asleep. I stayed awake for a long time that night, looking at the ceiling. By December of that year, the year I was 12, I had already started thinking about what I would do when I was old enough to leave. Not in a dramatic way. Not with anger. But in the practical, quiet way that children think about survival when survival is what they need. I had started keeping a notebook. Not a diary, more like a record. I wrote down things that happened. Dates. Words. Moments. I didn't know why exactly. Something in me just knew to keep a record. I didn't know yet how important that notebook would become. December came. And with December came Christmas. And with Christmas came the night that changed everything. Dad told us at the beginning of December that he had to travel for work. His company had a job in another city, something about a large delivery contract that needed him on site. He would be gone from December 23rd to December 26th. He was sorry about it. He promised us he would make it up to us. He said Patricia would take care of everything, and that Christmas Day we would celebrate properly when he returned. I saw the look on Daniel's face when Dad said he would miss Christmas Eve. Daniel didn't cry. He just nodded very seriously, the way little kids do when they are trying to be brave about something they don't understand. I hugged Dad before he left. He held me tight and kissed the top of my head and said, "Be good. Help Patricia. I'll be back before you know it." "I know," I said. He left on the morning of December 23rd. The house felt different the moment his car pulled out of the driveway. I don't know how to explain that feeling precisely. The temperature didn't change. The furniture didn't move. But something in the air shifted. Something that reminded me that without Dad in the house, there was no one between Patricia and us. That day was fine. Patricia was busy cleaning, organizing, preparing the house for Christmas. She had invited her sister and some friends for a Christmas Eve gathering. She was in her element, arranging things, making the house look beautiful. She barely spoke to us. Which was, honestly, easier than the alternative. Daniel and I watched television in our room. We ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. In the evening, Patricia ordered pizza, dropped it on the kitchen table and said, "There's dinner," without looking up from her phone, and we ate quietly and went to bed. December 24th. Christmas Eve. I woke up early. The snow had started overnight and the world outside was white and still. I made Daniel hot chocolate. We sat by the window and watched the snow fall, and Daniel said, "Do you think Santa knows Dad's not home?" "Santa always knows where the kids are," I told him. "Not where the parents are." He thought about that and decided it was acceptable. Mid-morning, Patricia's sister arrived. Her name was Donna. She was louder than Patricia, big laugh, big personality, big coat with fur trim. She hugged Patricia like she hadn't seen her in years. She looked at Daniel and me and said, "Oh, these are Bobby's kids," with a kind of surprised tone, like she had expected something different. Patricia smiled. "Yes," she said. "They're staying here while Bobby's away. Staying here." Like we were guests. Through the afternoon, more people arrived. Friends of Patricia's. A couple who lived down the street. A woman named Greta who brought wine and talked very loudly. The house filled up with adult voices and Christmas music and the smell of the food Patricia had spent 2 days preparing. Daniel and I stayed in our room mostly. We had learned that it was easier to be invisible when Patricia had company. We played board games. I read to him from a book we had gotten from the library. Around 5 o'clock, Patricia knocked on our door. She was dressed now, the red blouse, her hair styled, earrings in. She looked at us with an expression I had seen before. Polite. Controlled. But underneath it, something impatient. "There are guests downstairs," she said. "I need you both to be quiet. Don't come down unless I call you. There are snacks on the counter. Help yourselves at 7. Don't touch the platters on the table." "Okay," I said. She turned to go. And then Daniel, in that innocent way of his, said, "Is there a present under the tree for us?" "I saw some boxes this morning." She paused. Didn't turn around. "Those are for the guests," she said. "Your presents are coming when your father gets home." She left. The door clicked shut. Daniel looked at me. I looked at him. I smiled so he wouldn't see what I was feeling. "That's fine," I said. "Dad will bring something great. You know how he is." Daniel smiled back, reassured. I sat down on the floor and opened my book again, and I told myself to breathe. Just breathe. Only 2 more days. At 6:30, I heard a knock at our door again. When I opened it, it was Patricia. And she did not look polite anymore. Something had shifted in her face. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were very still. "I need you to come downstairs," she said. "Both of you." We followed her down. In the living room, the guests were all seated or standing around with glasses of wine. Everyone looked at us as we came down the stairs. Donna, Patricia's sister, was standing by the fireplace. She had a look on her face I couldn't read. Patricia stood in the middle of the room. She looked at me and then at Daniel. "I've been thinking," she said, in a voice that sounded very calm, very flat, "that it would be better if you stayed somewhere else tonight." The room went quiet. "There isn't space," she continued. "And the noise," she glanced at Daniel briefly, "it's been disruptive. I've arranged for you to go to Mrs. Farrow's." Mrs. Farrow was an elderly neighbor down the street. I didn't know her well. I had never been to her house. "You haven't called Mrs. Farrow," I said. I don't know how I knew that. I just did. Patricia's eyes flickered. "I will call her now. It will be fine." "You can't send us out on Christmas Eve," I said. My voice was very quiet. I was trying hard to keep it that way. "I can and I am." Her voice didn't change at all. "This is my home. Go and get your things." Donna made a small sound. One of the other guests shifted in their seat. Nobody said anything. I looked at my brother. He was looking at me with those big brown eyes of his, waiting, trusting me completely to know what to do. I went upstairs. I got our coats. I put Daniel's blue coat on him carefully, the one with the missing button, and I buttoned the ones that had buttons. I put on my own coat. I picked up the plastic bag near my closet, the one I had half-packed days ago, because some part of me had known, even if I hadn't said it out loud. I had packed 3 things in that bag, along with our pajamas and a change of clothes. My notebook, the writing competition certificate, and a folded piece of paper with a phone number on it. We came downstairs. Patricia was by the front door. She handed me a small bag, our things she had gathered from the kitchen. A granola bar. A juice box. "Mrs. Farrow knows you're coming," she said. I looked at her. I held Daniel's hand. And then I said, very softly, "I'm going to remember this night. Every part of it." She didn't respond. She opened the door. We walked out into the snow. The cold was immediate and complete. It hit my face and my hands and worked its way into my coat within a minute. The snow was still falling, softer now, gentler, the way snow sometimes falls on Christmas Eve, as if it doesn't know the world is not always gentle. Daniel held my hand, and we walked down the front path and out the gate. I looked back once. Patricia had already closed the door. The lights were on inside. I could hear faint music through the walls. Christmas music. Something cheerful. Where are we going? Daniel asked. Mrs. Farrow's, I said. Down the street. Do we know her? A little. We walked. Our breath made small clouds in the cold air. The street was empty. Everyone was inside, in their warm houses with their families. The Christmas lights on the houses looked different from out here in the dark. They looked like something belonging to another world. Mrs. Farrow's house was at the end of the street. It was a small blue house with a porch light on. I knocked. She answered in a housecoat and slippers. She was 70-something, soft-faced, silver-haired. She looked at us for a long moment, two children on her porch in the snow on Christmas Eve, and then she opened the door very wide and said, "You'd better come inside." We sat at her kitchen table. She made us hot tea and put out biscuits and didn't ask any questions for a while, which was exactly the right thing to do. Daniel ate 3 biscuits and fell asleep on her sofa within an hour, bundled under an old Afghan blanket. And then Mrs. Farrow sat across from me at the kitchen table and looked at me with kind, tired eyes and said, "Do you want to tell me?" So I told her. Not everything, but enough. The years of small cruelties. The way Patricia spoke to us. The way tonight had happened. My dad being away and not knowing. Mrs. Farrow listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Do you have someone to call?" she asked. "A relative?" I nodded. I unfolded the piece of paper I had packed in the bag. On it was the phone number for my Aunt Ruth. Aunt Ruth was my mother's older sister. She lived 3 hours away, in a city to the north. After Mom died, she had kept in touch, birthday cards, occasional phone calls, holiday gifts in the mail. But Patricia had made it gradually harder over the years. Unreturned calls. Visits that weren't a good time. A quiet, patient fence built between us and anyone from our mother's side. I had found Aunt Ruth's number in an old address book that had belonged to Mom. I had written it down and kept it. I don't know why exactly. I just knew to keep it. Mrs. Farrow let me use her phone. I dialed. It rang 3 times. "Hello." The sound of her voice, my mother's sister's voice, undid something in my chest that I had been holding very tight for a very long time. "Aunt Ruth," I said. "It's Clara." There was a small silence. Then, "Clara? What, sweetheart, it's Christmas Eve. Where are you?" I told her. My voice shook a little. I tried to keep it steady, the way I always tried to keep it steady. But some things are harder to hold together than others. Aunt Ruth did not panic. She was a calm woman, calm in the way that comes from having seen difficult things and deciding to be useful anyway. She asked me the address. She asked if Daniel was safe. She asked if I was safe. Then she said, "I am in my car in 40 minutes. You stay with Mrs. Farrow. Don't go anywhere." She arrived in 3 hours and 20 minutes. I was still sitting at Mrs. Farrow's kitchen table when I heard the car pull up. I had spent those hours thinking, writing in my notebook, going through every memory I could recall and putting it down in words, the dates, the moments, the things that had been said. Not out of anger, but because I had always known, somewhere deep inside me, that the time would come when I would need to be able to say, "This is what happened, and here is the proof." When Aunt Ruth came through Mrs. Farrow's door, she was wearing a heavy coat dusted with snow. She crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and held me for a long time without saying anything. Daniel woke up when he heard her voice. He blinked at her and then broke into a big sleepy smile. "Aunt Ruth," he said, like she was the most natural thing in the world to find on Christmas Eve. She laughed. It sounded like my mother's laugh, warm and a little rough around the edges. We stayed at Mrs. Farrow's that night. Aunt Ruth slept on the sofa. Daniel slept with her, curled up like a comma. I lay on the small cot Mrs. Farrow kept in the spare room and looked at the ceiling and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that someone grown-up was on our side. Christmas morning came quietly. Mrs. Farrow made oatmeal. We sat around her small table, 4 of us, and it was strange and tender, and not at all what Christmas was supposed to look like, and somehow it was one of the best Christmases I can remember. After breakfast, Aunt Ruth asked to see my notebook. I gave it to her. She read it carefully every page. Her face was very still while she read. When she finished, she closed it gently and placed her hand flat on the cover. "Clara," she said, "you've been very brave for a very long time." I didn't say anything. "Your father needs to know," she said. "Not to start a war. Not to make things worse. But because he loves you, and he doesn't know what's been happening. And he needs to know." I nodded. I had been afraid of this. Afraid of what it would do to Dad. Afraid he wouldn't believe me. Afraid he would believe me and then blame himself, which might somehow be worse. "He'll be sad," I said. "Yes," said Aunt Ruth. "He will be. But a good parent would rather be sad and know the truth than be happy and miss what's happening to their child." She called Dad that morning. She called him on Christmas Day while he was in his hotel room 3 hours away. I sat in Mrs. Farrow's kitchen and listened to half the conversation, Aunt Ruth's voice, low and steady, telling him what had happened. There was a silence on the other end of the call that lasted a long time. Then I heard, even from across the room, my father's voice break. He drove home that same day. He arrived in the late afternoon, still in his work clothes, his eyes red. He didn't go to our house first. He came straight to Mrs. Farrow's. He held us both for so long that Daniel started to laugh and said, "Dad, I can't breathe." And Dad laughed too, a wet, broken kind of laugh, and held us tighter. Later that evening, he went home. I don't know everything that was said that night between Dad and Patricia. I wasn't there. Aunt Ruth kept us at Mrs. Farrow's. But I know it was a long conversation. I know it was not a quiet one. And I know that when Dad came back, his eyes were different. Visual, a man sitting alone at a kitchen table. A cold cup of coffee. Christmas lights blinking on and off outside. Music, a gentle swell. Tender and quiet. In the weeks that followed Christmas, things changed quickly. Dad made decisions that were hard, and that cost him a great deal. He and Patricia separated in January. The separation was quiet, no public drama, no long legal battle. They had been married just over 2 years. There were no shared children to negotiate over. Only 2 children of his that she had left out in the snow. He told me later that what broke him was not the anger. He had expected to feel angry. What he had not expected was the shame of not having seen it sooner, of having been too tired and too trusting for too long. "I should have been paying more attention," he told me one evening, sitting on the edge of my bed the way he used to when I was little. "You were trying to tell me, weren't you?" "In small ways." "A little," I said. He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." "It's not your fault," I said. "And I meant it." He shook his head. "Some of it is. And I'm going to have to live with that. But what I can do now is make sure you never feel alone in this house again. Not ever." He kept that promise. Aunt Ruth came to stay with us for a month after the separation. She helped Dad get the house in order, not just physically, but in the quieter way. The way of having dinner conversations again. Of putting Mom's yellow bowl back in the front of the cabinet where it belonged. Of taking the family photos down from the hallway and rearranging them back the way they were, Mom's face where it had always been. I watched Dad pick up Mom's photo and hold it for a moment before hanging it back on the wall. He didn't say anything. He just held it and then placed it gently, straight and centered. I think that was the moment he forgave himself. Or started to. Daniel, being Daniel, adjusted to the new quiet quickly. Children can adapt in ways that sometimes astonish me. Within a few weeks, he was climbing on Dad again, asking for pancakes on Sundays, filling the house with his chatter the way he always had. He would ask sometimes where Patricia was, and Dad would say she had moved to her own house, and Daniel would nod, and that would be enough. But I took longer. It was not that I was angry, not exactly. It was more like I had to learn to feel safe again. To stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. To walk into the kitchen and not brace myself for a comment about what I was doing wrong. Those habits that you build when you live in a careful, watchful way, they don't leave you overnight. I kept writing in my notebook. Long after the reason that first made me start. I kept writing because it helped. Because putting feelings into words gave them a shape I could hold and look at, instead of just carrying them as a weight. Mrs. Aldridge, my teacher, noticed my writing getting better that year. She submitted another story to a competition. I won that one too. When I came home with the certificate, I put it on the kitchen table. Dad picked it up and read it. His eyes went bright. He said, "That's my girl." And this time, no one took that moment from me. I am grown now. I am far past 12. I have my own home, my own life, my own mornings that belong to me. Daniel is 23. He is studying to be a teacher, which surprises nobody who knew him as a child. He has that same quality he always had, that openness, that willingness to see the best in people. It makes him good with children. It will make him a wonderful teacher. Dad is older now too. He is still tall, still wide-shouldered, though the hair at his temples has gone gray. He remarried some years later a woman named Helen, who is quiet and kind, and who has never once made my brother or me feel like anything less than exactly where we belong. They are happy together. Real, settled, ordinary happiness. The kind that doesn't need to perform itself. Mrs. Farrow passed away 6 years ago. I went to her funeral. I sat in the back of a small church and thought about a kitchen table and hot tea and biscuits and an old woman who didn't ask questions right away, just opened her door and made space. I thought about how much that moment had meant. How a small act of welcome can change the whole direction of someone's life. I don't know what became of Patricia. We didn't stay in touch, and I don't seek information. I hope she is well. I genuinely mean that. She was not a villain. She was a person who struggled with something she could not manage and who made choices that hurt 2 children. That is real and serious. But it is also, I believe, something she carries. I don't need to carry it too. What I do carry, what I choose to carry, is the lesson. And the lesson is not what you might expect. It is not be careful who you trust, though that is true enough. It is not keep records, though that was useful, and I do not regret the notebook. The lesson is this. Children know more than we think they do. They feel more than we credit them for. They absorb the silences and the sighs and the looks that adults think go unnoticed. And when a child is quietly struggling, the most important thing in the world is for one adult, just one, to open a door and say, "I see you. Come inside." Mrs. Farrow was that person for me on Christmas Eve. Aunt Ruth was that person when she picked up the phone. And Dad, when he finally understood, he became that person too. He turned around, looked back at what he had missed, and he ran toward it instead of away from it. That took courage. More than people give credit for. I think about the girl I was at 12, walking through the snow with her brother's hand in hers, carrying a plastic bag with a notebook and a certificate and a folded piece of paper with a phone number on it. She didn't know she had activated anything, not really. She had just packed the things that mattered. Written down the truth. Kept the number. But sometimes that is all it takes. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep the number. Hold on to the truth. Walk through the snow with your head up and your little brother's hand in yours. And trust, even when trust is the hardest thing in the world, that there is someone at the end of the street with a porch light on and a door they will open when you knock. Thank you for listening to this story. If it stayed with you, if it touched something in your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you are someone's porch light tonight, if you are the person someone might knock on in the cold, I hope you leave your light on. Because you may never know whose whole life changes because you open the door. Good night.